Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight on another episode of Spanning the Need. Tonight, we're going to talk with Barb Ewing, CEO of the Youngstown Business Incubator in downtown Youngstown, one of the best incubators in the world. And that's really good to say, especially in downtown Youngstown. Barb, thank you for joining me. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Tony. I'm glad to be here with you.
So let's talk about, so you're the new CEO. You've been in about 2 years. Is that about right?
Give
or take?
Going on 4. I'm rounding the halfway point. Yeah. So, and before that, I was there for 7 years before that. So, I'm new in spirit only, like I'm young in spirit only. So, I definitely have some what's the word I'm looking for? Some road tread on me. I've been around the block a couple times.
Well, and that's something that, let's talk about that. You come with a very big background of economic development and some other business entrepreneurs. So talk about kind of how you started your career and how you got to where you are now.
Well, mine is not a story that was well planned, and I had a clear vision of where I wanted to be. It really was more of a situation that I came out of college with a liberal arts degree. I knew how to write and to assimilate information, and I had the very good fortune to land a job with Jim Costler when he ran the Better Business Bureau. It was an entry-level position. There was nothing glorious about it, but I loved that job. I loved the work that the Bureau did. We had really a great team at that time, and I threw myself into that job heart and soul. And, my husband at the time felt like I could be making more money somewhere else, but I loved the mission and I loved the people that I worked with. And so, I gave it my all and had a strong sense, and actually it was something that Jim instilled in me as well. There's a book called The 4 Agreements, and 2 of the truisms of this book are be impeccable with your word and be impeccable with your work, do good work. And so I knew that from the book, but I also knew just in having a conversation with Jim one day, I had given him an off-the-cuff answer, and it was the wrong answer. It was the wrong answer. And I had moved into somebody else's position at the time. She had left for another job, and I took over her position. And when I gave him that answer, and he went and checked out and found out that I was wrong, he said, the one thing about Karen that I will tell you I love best about her is that she never guesses. If she doesn't know the answer to a question, she goes to the trouble of finding out what the answer is rather than just giving me an answer. And I really thought long and hard about that. And when you really think about that, you understand, you can really see the wisdom of it. Having an answer at your fingertips, just knowing something off the cuff, that's a good thing, but it's not the same as being willing to always just double check and to make sure that you know what your facts are. And that was such a moment for me. In that moment, I really learned a very valuable lesson that has carried forward for other things throughout my career. I moved from there. I went over to the chamber when Jim left the Better Business Bureau and went over to the chamber. I went as well. My position at that time was to build membership, but I eventually transitioned into a government affairs position. And as I was working with the members of our state delegation, I just knew I had to prove myself to them. And I only had one shot. If I ever gave them one time information that wasn't accurate or wasn't well researched, if I didn't follow up on something that I told them that I'd do, that I would lose whatever faith or whatever trust I was building with them. And it has led me on this path, not a straight line by any stretch of the imagination, but because of that, doors have opened for me, and a little bit of good luck.
And that's some good advice to learn. If you don't know the answer, be honest about it. Say, hey, I don't know the answer, but let me go find it and I'll get you that answer. And I think some people may not understand that, but in certain positions, you learn that.
Yeah, and I had that play out on the other side once for a really important project for the Mahoning Valley, dealing with a member of a federal agency. It happened to be the Corps of Engineers, and he really staked a lot on information that was inaccurate. And there was a lot of face lost for him and for everybody else that was supporting that project. It can really have damning consequences and be devastating to an organization. So it is good advice for everything that you're doing.
Well, you see that playing out here in the election, or actually just in everyday life now with misinformation, disinformation, fake news. Here's a story that, hey, we just had. But wait a minute. That's not even the correct story. You have one sentence that's the correct quote, but the rest of the story has been tamed to go somewhere else where it should have never gone.
Right. And I tell people all the time, I will never unfriend somebody on Facebook for their opinion. I may snooze them for a while so that I can have a little break, but I will never unfriend anybody for their opinions. But if people are knowingly posting things that are inaccurate or misleading and they get called out for it and they won't take it down, that's pretty much my straw that I'm done. I mean, you've got to have the integrity to be willing to retract stuff that is not accurate. And
I think people that do that, like I'll give you a perfectly good example. I posted a picture of a storm a while back ago, and I pulled it from a news source I thought was reliable. Makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Well, from what I found out, that picture, the media got it and said, well, it was a fake picture. Someone sent it to us that had nothing to do with the storm. So I then retracted it and wrote something on my Facebook page to say, hey, I'm not here to do fake news. I'm here to give you correct information. And this was probably about a year or two ago. And it just, you thought you do your research, but then you kind of fall into play and say, hey, unfortunately, we're not perfect.
Right. Yeah. I remember that story. I can't remember what was wrong about the storm. I don't remember the specifics of it. Was it the storm or was it the wildfires in Australia?
It was the storm around here in the Mahoning Valley about a tornado.
Okay.
Because the clouds were so you would think that coming from a reliable news source, well, they even got fooled. So I think that kind of shows the difference with fake news and information. You got to do a little bit more digging, unfortunately.
It's all true. And I mean, I know we're all guilty of it, but if you're just reposting stuff that just comes up in your news feed and not reading it and not seeing if it actually passes the smell test, I mean, does it make sense? Are you willing to go the extra mile and actually Google it to see if you can verify the information? Then you probably shouldn't be reposting it. Read it and move on. Exactly. But you don't have to repost everything that comes across your news feed.
Exactly. And you just want to be true and honest. And people nowadays, it's, hey, this person has done this person has done that. But then at the same time, it's like, well, where's the documentation? You just put something on your feed that has, and I'll always say when I read something from someone, I don't say, I'm like, okay, where did you get that information from? There's no links, no nothing. And then you look at,
absolutely.
And then you look at the website when they share something and it's like backyard.com or something. And you're like, okay, you know what? It is what it is. And I think that kind of really puts a damper on people doing anything anymore.
And unfortunately, we have really, as a society, turned our back on science and are just too willing to dismiss science if it doesn't align with our personal belief system. And if there's anything in society that concerns me, it's that. I mean, we could be using science to get out of these holes, and instead we're heading in the opposite direction.
Well, and I think that brings up a great point is when you work for the chamber, those companies and federal agencies want knowledge, information, the correct information. And actually, that's where you took your next step in Congressman Tim Ryan's office.
That was where I took the next step. And
Tell us a little bit about
that's
that
a very
position.
nice segue. Thank you. You are quite the host there, giving me a good segue. So
I appreciate that. I try.
So yeah, I spent 7, almost 8 years working for Congressman Ryan doing community and economic development, and had the great privilege to work on the Valoric project when they were building the new plant. The last big round of base realignment and closure commission processes when they were looking at whether or not they were going to downsize the 910th Airlift Wing and close the Youngstown Air Reserve Station. And I was also the center of the storm for the local appropriations process when we could still earmark projects. The congressman had both the good fortune and the strong relationships to get put onto the appropriations committee very early in his career. And the very best part of my job, what I loved most, was working with the local community to understand what their needs were and to see if we could find ways to get money allocated in the federal budgetary process on an annual basis to get projects done. So we worked on things like the Warren Amphitheater and the bike path, and some money for Packard Museum. Lots of different community projects we were able to secure federal funding for, and make a difference in the community. He's still on that committee, and now I think this will be the second person on the defense subcommittee, and lots of opportunities there for us as a community to still engage in that process. It's something that really I think we only marginally understand the value of that.
Well, and I think that brings up a good point, is because I was an intern for Congressman Ryan many years ago.
I seem to remember that.
Yeah, and I remember, and I worked with you, and I'm not going to lie, that office, I'm not going to lie. Okay, so some people think that these jobs are, it's just a laid back 8 to 5 job, working for a congressman, working in the district. And I don't think what people understand is I worked in the Youngstown office for a summer. It's crazy. I mean,
it's crazy.
Phones ring
all the time.
Exactly.
Busy.
And I worked with you on a lot of projects.
Pardon?
And I worked with you for a lot of projects in that economic development. I remember I'd get you, hey, Tony, I need this report. Where is it? I'm like, here it is. And just trying to get, because I know there is so much going on. There's so many projects that people either want funding for or are trying to get funding for.
Or just the normal constituent problems, and trying to help companies or individuals go through whatever their problems are with the federal agencies and get solutions for those. So, a congressman's work is never done. Those offices, those employees are working many hours doing all types of work, trying to help the people in the district. And we appreciate your service, Tony. You were one of our best.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's a lot of good interns that have gone through that office that are now politicians. So, and so actually that kind of takes it into the next goal is, well, then you go to the YBI, Youngstown Business Incubator, from the economic development of nonstop to a small incubator that is a startup in Youngstown, Ohio. Tell us a little bit about how the YBI got started and how you got involved.
Well, so back around 1999, a bunch of community leaders came together. There was federal funding available to do what was basically an urban redevelopment program. That's not technically correct if anybody's doing the research, but there was funding available to build an incubator. And at that time, there was nothing really happening on the west side of downtown. There was truly a vacuum. And from Market Street over to Home Savings, and just very little activity. And community leaders came together and secured the federal funding to do at least the first phase of the project initially.
Right.
I think they did the first 2 floors, and then they secured additional dollars later to do the upper floors. And at the same time, the state was putting together a program through, at the time, it was the Edison program to support incubators around the state. And
I think wasn't that through Governor Taft's office?
No, this would have been when it was still
Voinovich.
Governor Voinovich.
Voinovich.
Yeah, and so they had funded YBI initially when we were just a general purpose incubator, so working with any type of company that came through the door. But in 2000, 2001, they created the Edison, the technology programs for Edison, and they essentially told Jim, who was at that time just starting at YBI, and the board members that if they wanted to continue to receive the state funding to operate the incubator, they had to align with one of 7 different technologies. And that was like advanced energy, software, healthcare, advanced materials. Well, the only one we really had the capability for at the time was software, because if you spent 1 minute with Jim, you know that software is fast to market, fast to fail, and it has a very low startup cost compared to advanced energy projects, and low capital costs, and anybody can come up with an idea. You can see a problem in your own business where you work and try to solve it with a software solution. So that was the path we chose, and that was in 2001. And by 2007, we were providing sophisticated enough services that and supporting the growth of some really great founders that by 2007, Turning Technologies was announced as the fastest growing software company in the United States by both Ernst & Young and Inc. magazine. So, and the rest, as they say, is legend.
Right, and actually, since Turning Technologies goes downtown Youngstown, builds a massive facility, and they're still in business to this day and still thriving, and that's a good thing to see.
It is. They are still downtown, and it's actually our building. I don't know if you know that, but we have 5 buildings on our campus. That was our first expansion, and they have that space, and then that's the Semple building beside that is where the coffee shop is downtown, Joe Max. Mm-hmm. They've got some space in that building, and then we've got another tenant, FactSet Revere, on the top floor. That's something that the community has never really understood. We had a California-based company that does research for the financial markets that probably now full 10 years ago was really struggling. They did their research in Mumbai, but they weren't making any money. So their CIO at the time convinced their CEO to come to Youngstown to see what we could do. And they established Revere Data in Youngstown. They've had probably between 40 to 50 employees at different times. And I don't know, 5 years ago, they were acquired by FactSet, which is the second largest provider of information to the financial markets to Bloomberg. Correct. Which is the name that everybody...
Which is a massive corporation.
Yeah. So that's one of our lesser known stories. It doesn't get told as often as some of the other stories. In 2010, we had the good fortune to be named as the home for the National Additive Manufacturing Innovation Institute, now known as American Makes.
American Makes, which is a massive manufacturer, yep.
And they are the federally funded research program around additive manufacturing or 3D printing. They're really a connector, a convener. Their stated goal is to be the national accelerator for additive manufacturing, getting more companies engaged in the technology, making the materials more widely available, a more diverse base of materials, workforce development, really making the industry more robust and ingrained in U.S. operations. And that really redefined YBI's roles in many ways. We started developing programs to support additive manufacturing startups, and then also developing programs to support the adoption of additive manufacturing. And those two things are what led to the fifth building, the former Vindicator building, which we renovated and are getting ready to submit a proposal for the second round of renovations there as well.
How big is that building?
It's 65,000 square feet. We renovated
Wow.
about 40,000 first round, and we're getting ready to complete that because we've got two companies that need the additional space.
Yeah.
Before we jump, though, and spend too much time talking about that, we also were approached by the state. I think it's been 3 years ago now, but I do lose track of time.
We all do in some shape or form.
Yeah, to become the Minority Business Assistance Center for the Eastern Corridor for the state of Ohio. So from Ashtabula down to Monroe County, way far down south, we provide services to small businesses that are minority-owned, veteran-owned, socially economically disadvantaged. We also have a women's program, and I think I'm missing a category there, but that's another great program. And really, that was also redefining for YBI, really expanded our mission well beyond just working with a fairly small sliver of companies.
And I think that brings up a great point is you're not here to attract businesses. You're here to help entrepreneurs make those businesses.
We do both, but yes, the bulk of our work, most of our days are spent working with existing companies, helping them be more successful. Whether it is a small family-owned restaurant that's looking to expand, or one of our software or additive manufacturing companies, for the most part, those companies are local talent that are growing their businesses. But we do have exceptions to that rule, and we do have a number of companies like Revere FactSet, like Fitz Frames, the eyeglass company that's using 3D printing to make custom fit glasses. I should have worn my glasses. That wasn't very clever of me. And more recently, Rugged 3D. So we do both, but most of our time is spent working with our existing industrial base or existing companies, not just industry, but any company.
How many companies do you have under your portfolio right now? Do you have any idea?
Well, it depends on, it depends is the right answer. It depends. So for the Entrepreneurial Signature Program, that is the technology startup program, we're part of the Northeast Ohio startup community through Jumpstart. And I think we work with somewhere between 75 to 100 companies through that. We have a small grant through the city of Youngstown that we probably work with 10 to 15 companies, specifically low to moderate incomes within the city of Youngstown. Our community our MBAC program at any given time is probably working with another 50 to 75 different companies in different stages. I mean, some of that more or less meaningful, depending upon where they're at. And then our additive manufacturing team has a couple very large grants that they're working on, including a program right now, one with Goodyear Tire and Rubber, and also one with Valoric, our local steel company, helping them integrate additive into their operations. But then we have any number of smaller projects that are going on at the same time. So it just depends on which angle you're looking from.
Well, and so let me ask you this. If someone wanted to look for expertise, entrepreneurship, do they just call your office? Is it that
Call our
easy?
office, go to our website. We've got any number of different ways of coming in. Our tagline is elevating every entrepreneur, and we are trying to streamline our processes so that as an entrepreneur comes through our door, we are figuring out behind the scenes where do they fit in and which program are they eligible for. So there's a button on our website that will link you into our staff, but they can call. Certainly they can call. And we've got all of the different social media platforms. I'm sure that if somebody is looking to find a way to engage with us, they'll find one.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. And one thing that I really enjoy, and you're kind of one of those untold, the YBI is one of those untold stories. itself. It's the small incubator that became a big incubator in the world and got noticed in 2014, if I'm correct.
That's
That
right
was
here.
when
Yep.
that was when you were ranked #1 incubator in the world. And there's hundreds of different types of incubators in the world. And how did that feel when you won the #1 in the world? That had to be some just accomplishment and achievement.
Well, it took a long time, I think, for it to really sink in.
Did you second guess? Like, you're like, are you got the right incubator?
Well, we had an inkling we were pretty good when we were number 11 the year before. So, we knew we were in the running, but they wouldn't tell us. I mean, they just kept, they were real cagey with the information as it was coming out. And John and Jim kept saying, we think we're #1. And I'm like, they're crazy. They're crazy. But in fact, they were right. We were ranked #1. And one of my favorite pictures on Facebook just came up. The year that we were ranked number 11, one of the city council members had joked and said something like, can't you just kind of maybe tear off one of those ones so that it says you're #1? And so when we were awarded, when we went from number 11 to #1, we had a crew come in and they put a great big X, great big red X over one of over the second #1 and the number 11, so that we were clearly identified as #1 in the world. And now we have a new sign, but that's one of my favorite memories of that time, was just seeing that. And that's so classic Youngstown,
Yeah.
Classic.
That is. It is, because it's small, steel town, been through a lot, gets this national recognition, well, world recognition. And I just have to ask this question: how were you notified?
Oh, well, the think tank that put it together, we had lots of conversation with them, lots and lots of conversations. So we had a pretty good idea before the press announcement, just based upon, all of the back and forth. We did have a pretty good, but we were truly notified by phone. I mean, that it was inkled pretty heavily prior to it. So
answer the phone when we call. Don't answer voicemail. Just answer the phone.
More or less.
So let's take that in 2014 and say, okay, you win this. How does this change you after that? Like the next 12 to 16 months, what happened? Anything? Or was it normal, business as normal?
Well, as I look back on that time, I think we all really had a reckoning that this is our moment. If there was ever a time for us to start talking about how we could support companies, and really start attracting companies to the region, this is the time that we need to take advantage of it. And as we talk about bringing companies to Youngstown, certainly being able to say that we were recognized as the #1 incubator in the world it's definitely a chip that gets people's attention. You're clearly not talking about some program that doesn't have any resources behind it. So, it's only one factor of many as people are evaluating where they're going to locate their business. But it doesn't hurt. I will tell you that it doesn't hurt. So,
and that's good to know.
Yeah. But since then, I think we really have worked to build programs, to continue to build programs, and to make sense of the resources that we do have. So this is a conversation I had with Jim today. The value proposition that we have, both for additive manufacturing and then any really advanced manufacturing technology, whether it's industrial IoT or something else, it's a different value proposition for us, because we do have such strong ties back to the manufacturing community and to all of the resources that America Makes can leverage. It is a story to tell, and if we hadn't been interrupted with COVID, I think rugged would not be the only story that we're talking about this year in terms of businesses relocating, or moving from wherever they are to launch their businesses in North America from Youngstown.
And I think it's kind of funny. We talked a little bit. Is you and Jim were at the BBB. Then, if I'm correct, you and Jim were at the Chamber. I see a trend here. I see a trend here, Barb. I see it, and now Jim goes to YBI, and now all of a sudden, Barb is at YBI. Now Jim has actually put his retirement in order, unfortunately. So
does that mean I get to retire? If I'm just following him around, do I get to retire with him?
Hey, that ain't my. Hey, I can't make that decision. Only you can.
Trust me, I cannot. I live on a farm, and there's a saying in farmland, however you want to put it, that behind every successful farmer, there's a wife who works in town. So this wife has to work in town, even though I'm not married and not married to a farmer. So I'm not retiring anytime soon.
But it's just funny how if you kind of look back and hear that you got BBB, the Regional Chamber, now YBI. Now, Jim just made his announcement about a month ago about retiring, which I wish him the best of luck. He's done a tremendous job with you guys, have really turned it up. And I'll ask this one question. And so out of all the stories of YBI, what is the untold story that maybe the area or the world really hasn't heard about?
This is a little hard to put my arms around, or to give you a story that's meaningful. But we've had a number of small successful exits. Well, let me say it a different way. We've had a number of successful exits that for any number of reasons had to remain confidential. And have to remain confidential to this time. And so,
understandable.
As people point to our success stories, they tend to point to Turning Technologies, of course, and it is a great success story. But that's the one that was public, but that doesn't mean that there weren't other exits. It's just that, we were never allowed to announce them for whatever reason.
And that's understandable. And that's understandable because, like you guys, what people I think may not know is with the American Makes and the additive manufacturing is that also brought the U.S. Department of Defense, also brought Youngstown State on board, that now you have the school and everything kind of come together with this manufacturing to really boost the economy. Even if you say, hey, it's a small thing, but it's growing faster and faster.
Right. And I think that for YBI, at least, having America Makes on our campus so fundamentally redefined who we are that it is, it's hard to even really get your arms around how different we are as an organization, by virtue of the fact that we've been able to build these relationships with local companies. So a great example of that is Hometown Products out of Columbiana. They were a very traditional business that made patterns for the metal casting industry. They came to us almost a decade ago. I mean, not quite that long ago, since America Makes has only been with us for less than that, but you get the point. And started talking about the fact that you could print the sand cores that are central to the metal casting industry. Metal casting is a technology that goes back to the Bronze Age. So you create a mold and you make a reverse image of what you want to build, and you get molten metal and you pour the molten metal into the mold. And where there is sand, there will be metal, and where there is air, there will be, no, I always get that wrong, but where there is air, there will be, where there is, it doesn't matter. It creates a reverse image, and you can
something like that, right?
Lots of different things using this technology. When we started this journey, we as an organization knew virtually nothing about sand cores, metal casting. But we saw an opportunity in working with Hometown. YSU had faculty members that were very interested in the technology. America Makes helped partner us up with the American Foundry Society, the University of Northern Iowa, which at the time was clearly the world leader in using metal cast or using sand cores for very advanced metal castings, and the X1 Corporation and some others, and building this local talent base. We have now really created a cachet of expertise in the use of this particular technology to make our companies more competitive. And I think we know how to do it better than anybody. So when I mentioned earlier that we're doing projects with Vallourec and Goodyear, it's both of those projects, and they're hundreds of thousands of dollars of state funding going into these projects with funding from the companies themselves. But for Vallourec, we're helping them redesign their piercing points so that they last longer, and that they've got they're really optimizing the design capacity that 3D printing allows, because 3D printing allows you to put materials where you could not, in a way, you can create a shape that you couldn't create using a traditional manufacturing process. You're putting materials either from above or below, so you don't have those angles that you're working from. You can literally build a ship in a bottle and a bottle in a bottle. So 3D printing lets you do things that you can't do using other technologies. And I guess that would have been a better answer for you if I thought about what is our untold story, but we talk about it so much that maybe it's not an untold story. It's just not one that people appreciate the region's knowledge in this, and how great this partnership between America Makes, YBI, and YSU has been in building these relationships and strengthening our local industrial base.
And I'll be the first to say, and I've worked with the guys that have done the 3D modeling, the 3D printing, American Makes. As I was the purchasing coordinator at Youngstown State, when there was funding and it was going through the university, I was purchasing the massive 3D printers that are bigger than a car. Yep. That are hundreds of thousands of dollars. And people might not understand is these machines come in a million pieces before you got to put it together. And I think that's the funny part about it is, yeah, where do you want to ship it, YBI? Well, why not at YSU? I go, hey, just ship it down there, because that's where it's going to be assembled and put together.
Well, and that's not a small point. So when you talk about the X1 product that Hometown is using to create these sand cores, they've gone from one machine that is owned by the university that they manage for them and have really built great capacity around. But I think they now own 4 or 5. I'm not sure what their total count is up to. And railroad cars of sand come into Latonia, Ohio for this particular machine, because they have built up that much of a book of business and are doing projects with name brand companies around the country. Truly are an amazing asset to this community, and are making U.S. manufacturing competitive again.
And that's a great point, because now, come 2020, hey, you guys are looking good, looking at what can be good for 2020, and then COVID hits. And I think everyone looks at it, it's like it stops. Business at certain facilities and businesses just stopped. How have you guys been still be able to do what you do, or has there been a little holdback because of COVID?
Well, that's a mixed bag. I mean, we have a lot of different programs and a lot of different companies, so there's no single answer there. A lot of our additive companies pivoted very quickly into making personal protective equipment for at least a period of time, so they were pretty busy during the early days of the pandemic. Other companies, it's been much more difficult. If you are selling into the nursing home industry, you are going through tough times right now, no doubt about that. Another unknown story, and one that I can't say often enough, I don't think anybody understands how much and how active our Minority Business Assistance Center team and our other team members were during the early stages, especially of the pandemic, when nobody knew up from down, trying to help companies get through the loan process for the PPP and the EIDL, and any of the other loan processes that they needed. Our staff was working extensively with companies and not asking questions about, we were at that moment truly elevating every entrepreneur. If you needed help, our doors were open to you. And I think that really it was one of those inflection points for us that we saw truly the need for support for our businesses. It was, you can lean into these things, or you can try to do business as normal, and we really lent into it. And I will give that team credit for the work that they did all day long.
And let me ask you this question. Was there anything that stood out that this pandemic has brought to the forefront? Funding, people not having enough resources, anything that you saw that, hey, we were not aware of that, or we knew that there was a problem, but not to this extent?
Well, I think it's I think the biggest thing that we have seen is what other people have talked about, but you can't say it often. You can't say it too much. There truly was a divide between minority-owned businesses and other businesses owned by majority members, white-owned businesses, and structurally, this did not play out well for businesses that have traditionally struggled to have strong banking relationships anyway. Many decisions were made by many different people about how the rules would read and what was fundable and what wasn't fundable. And just systemically, I think it really underscored the challenges that are seen by minority-owned businesses and socially and economically disadvantaged businesses that just couldn't even get to the table, could not get to the table. And then when you see that, so many of those stories about companies that probably were not intended to get the funding, it was perhaps not the intent or the highest and best good, were able to take advantage of the situation. It really was pretty heartbreaking. I happen to have had a conversation today with a woman-owned business, and you just see the ramifications of those decisions.
And I think that brings to the point is I think what you said resonates with the rest of the country, not just here in the Mahoning Valley, but maybe quadruples here in the Mahoning Valley because of how depressed some areas of it are. So I think that brings a great point.
Yeah, it is, a truism that there's a difference between having a bank or having just a checking account or a banking, a business account, and having a relationship with a bank. And if you were in that unfortunate category that you didn't have a strong relationship with the bank, which is many of our minority-owned businesses, it was just not a process that you can get through because it was based upon, in so many ways, based upon relationships. Well,
and I hope we can fix that problem, because I think the question will be is, okay, we see our flaws, we our loopholes. Now the question is, how do we fix that problem? And that's something that's going to have to be dealt with in the coming 6 months to 12 months to figure out how that's going to work.
Right. I mean, as you look at this summer and all of the different things that have played out, and the tragedies that have unfolded, and the protests, and it is sad to say that we are still so much in a position of just left versus right, red versus blue, that we're not really having conversations about fixing the problem. We're just, I think, not even shouting at each other, just, shouting internally at talking to ourselves. Everybody's preaching to the choir and not really looking for the solutions that are clearly out there and that I think we want to get to. But until we stop being so polarized, you're not going to find solutions.
Oh, and I agree. So, kind of, what's next for the YBI? What are you looking for? Are you looking 5 years ahead, 3 years ahead, or are you just trying to get out of the pandemic?
Well, I think both of those statements are true. We are in the process of writing our either 3 or 5 year strategic plan. I mean, we're only just starting that. So we are in the process of working on our next strategic plan. But there's also an element of it's pretty hard to plan for the future when you don't know when the future is going to start. So we're also just planning for 2021 right now and trying to take stock of where we are as an organization. What resources do we have going into 2021? What programs do we think will continue? What won't continue? And building and rebuilding from there, taking a good hard look at what we do well and maybe where we need to have some improvements. We've got a survey that will be going out to community members soon and sooner to help give us feedback in terms of what priorities we should be looking at and what other areas what we do well and where we can improve upon, and really just also some honest feedback about what the needs are in a community. That saying, to hammer everything looks like a nail, we see things the way we see things. And sometimes you do have to step back and ask other people for some input so that you can see things more clearly. And
I agree with that, because you only see what you see kind of in your bubble. And I think getting input on what people assume, which you never want anyone to assume. You want them to know, like we talked a little bit about earlier, we want you to know facts about the organization or what we're doing so you can make an educated decision on what that may be, if it's invest in your organization or do a variety of different stuff. Right.
I mean, if people don't really know what you're doing, then first off, that's not helpful to them and it's not helpful to you. But then at the same time, they can't help be better. That you've got to start with some kind of an education process.
Oh, and that's a great point. And anything you can tell us that you haven't announced yet that you're going to be announcing other than the survey coming out? Anything you want to announce on the show?
More than happy to. Nice try.
Come on, Barb, give me some. I worked for you. I helped you out. Help a fellow friend out. Give me an announcement other than Jim retiring.
Oh, let me see. Oh no, I don't really have anything right now. Nothing that's
I tried.
In trouble. So
you're hard. What do you mean you're going to yell at you, or Jim's not going to yell at you?
You have no idea what my life is really like.
It's retiring.
We've known each other for so long that we absolutely can still yell at each other. So,
do you finish each other's sentences too?
I'm sure we do. Yeah, I'm sure we do. I can't think of an example of that, but yes, I'm quite sure we do.
No example needed. I think I'll just give people the images that they worked at BBB together, then they all went to the regional chamber. Jim went to the YBI, and then Barb came after that, after going to the Congressman Ryan's office. So it works hand in hand.
You kind of make me sound pretty lame, Anthony.
No. You know what? No, you have to understand it. Just so everyone knows, I've known Barb for about 20 years. Barb is probably one of the most hardest working people I know in the Mahoning Valley. Works hard, does well, and asks nothing in return. So trust me, when I say you've jumped from different organizations, because you do good in what you do.
Well, thank you. I do try my best. I love this community. And there is really nothing that I want more for it than to see it thrive again. And I think
a lot of us do. I think a lot of us do that kind of stayed here. and kind of like, hey, I lived in Warren, moved to Youngstown to go to school, went back home, came back to Youngstown. Youngstown was calling my name. I don't know what to say about anything else. And I live in the city. So, I mean, it's all good.
It is. I couldn't be prouder. Couldn't be prouder to be from Youngstown. It is home in so many different ways.
Barb, it's always a pleasure to stay on after this. Thank you, everyone, for taking time. Barb, it's always a pleasure. I know how busy you are. You're always welcome on my podcast, and we hope you the best of luck in the future. Thank you, everyone, for
having an announcement. I'll let you know.
Yeah, hey, just stay on. We'll get to that announcement. Check out other podcasts or interviews at anthonyvspano.com. Be safe. God bless. Have a great night.